Hey, Matt here again with Eris is Red, and today we're going to be using Cinema 4D, Xparticles, and Octane to create this animation. Okay, so let's start with an Xparticle system. And we're going to change the emitter. I have mine set to spherical mode by default. Let's change the radius to 10 centimeters. I'm just going to zoom back a little bit, and since we're going to be using strange attractors, let's go to motion modifiers and strange attractors. And the one I'd like to use is Berkshaw. And we'll see what we have right away. And so this is kind of the look that we're having. I think it's going a little too quickly, and so we could adjust the max speed, but instead I think I would like to do it through retiming. So let's go to, in the emitter, let's go to the object tab and change the retiming to 75. And that will slow things down a bit. And that's what we have. Okay. Save that. And what we want to add to that is a trail. And under the generators, let's add an XP trail and make the emitter the source for the trail. And this is what we'll have. And right now we're making 1,000 particles per frame. And so that is going to be a little taxing for the system and create a lot of processing needs. So let's go to the emitter instead and change it from rate to pulse. And we want to pulse every 90 frames. And to lessen the load a bit, we could change the lifespan of the particles. Let's just see what happens when we do that. It's set to 90 frames, so when it gets to 90 frames, they'll just die. And don't really like that. It's a bit too jerky. So instead, let's go back to full lifespan, and an interesting way of doing it, one that I've been using a lot lately, is using questions. So let's go to the emitter again, and go to questions, add a question, and the question that we want is it's going to ask how old is the particle data, age, and when the particle is older than 90 frames, we want it to do something. And what do we want it to do? Let's add an action. And then we want object actions and change trails. And then we want to change our trail. And so we want to shrink trails and then kill particle when trail equals 0 length. And let's see what happens now. So you can see them kind of dying just as the new ones are starting. And so that is the look that I want. I'm doing this in 1920 by 1080, so I actually kind of want this to be twisted a little bit so that it fits in the full frame. So let's just rotate the emitter by, I don't know, 45-ish, see what happens. Actually, rotating the emitter is not going to do anything. To rotate the strange attractor. So let's put that to minus 45 and apply, and see what we have here. And that's better. Okay. So, now one thing I really like to do is to use Mograph, Cinema 4D's Mograph with Xparticles, because you can get some really interesting effects. And so what I'd like to do, which you saw in the example, is to clone some cubes onto this trail. And we can do that just with a cloner. So let's make a cloner. I've got a default set to object mode. And the way you can do that is setting defaults is, say I want it linear instead. I can go up to, where is it here? Edit, and then set as default. And then do you want to proceed? I'm not going to, but then every time you open it, it'll be on whatever. And you can do that with almost anything, including X particles windows, which is how I set mine to a spherical emitter. Okay, let's go to, you can hear my cat yelling in the background because she wants outside. We'll go outside in a bit, okay? I'm doing a tutorial. Okay, object mode, and I want to clone some cubes onto it. So holding shift, put the cube in there, and let's make it pretty small to start. 3.5 squared, add a little fillet because it looks nice. Put that to 0.5, fillet subdivision 10. And then what do we want to clone onto? We want to clone onto our trail. Now you'll get some options here. I'm going to change this down the count to 2 right away, and we'll see what we have. So you can see there's a bunch of lumps in the middle, and then we'll slowly start to move outwards on that. And when the trail shrinks, it will eventually, these will all disappear as well. But, so you get that little popping, and I don't like that popping, so what can we do to avoid that? Actually, I want to show you one other thing. No, actually, I'll wait. So yeah, so we're going to be using Octane to make these trails visible later, but I want these to be able to, the cubes to move along the trail independently of what we have going on with the X particles. So one way we can do that is to just make them a static trail. I'll show you what I mean. Let's kill this emitter for now, just deactivate it. Let's make a new emitter, and we'll do a shot of, make a shot of 500. Let's make a new trail for this, and the XP emitter 1 is going to correspond with our trail 1, and let's just stop that original trail, and I had it to shot 500. Yeah, let's see what we have here. So okay, and of course, because this one I haven't retimed it, so it's going a lot quicker. Let's say we're happy with that. One thing I always do with trails, and I'll do it with this one as well, is I will go into spline and then change it to Bezier and adaptive. You could use subdivided to smooth it out a bit, but I found with subdivided you get this kind of jerking effect on here, and adaptive you don't get that. So okay, so this trail is now what we're going to use to clone our clones onto. So let's press C to make it editable, get rid of this tag, drag that out of our system, not into the cloner, out of our system, and then let's use that as our clone source. And so if I just disable our X particles for now, you can see that we have these cloned on here. Now, one cool thing with the cloner for splines is you can add a rate. And so, say if you do 50%, it goes crazy, but if you do 1%, they're just going to slowly move along this trail. And so this will be kind of our ghost trail, and so we're just going to hide that because we don't want to see it. The cat is still yelling at me. Okay, so now because we're using a cloner, we can also use Mograph Effectors. And so one I really like to use, just to get a bit of variation with it, is a formula. And you can see that it's a little nutty right away. Let's turn off position, and let's just have some scale. Now it's going way too quickly. So let's go into our effector and variables, and under project time here, set that to 0.2. And so we'll have this slow slow kind of morphing effect. And then in the cloner, we can adjust our parameters here a bit. I can offset it just to get the look that we want. I kind of like what that's doing. You can play with these. Align clone, you can have them all facing the camera, which is kind of neat on its own. But I like them to be aligned with it. So, okay, we've got that set up. We can now get rid of that emitter that we used for that. Turn on our X-particle system again. And, oh, in this one thing, let's just let this play out a bit, because there was one thing I noticed while I was testing this. I think there was some weird popping that we got, that we might get with this as well. I'm just going to make that visible again. Okay, well, I'm not seeing the popping, but because the trails will end at a certain point, and so these might jump back to the beginning again. I'm not seeing it here, but if you do get the popping, what you can do is just go close spline, and then it'll look a bit weird because you have some of these lines here, and when they get to the end, they might shoot back up, but I never noticed it before because I had set the endpoint to not go, so they're not traveling all the way to the end of the spline, and it's set to loop as well. So, I can play with rate variation, so some go faster. Anyway, so that is set up there. Now let's continue on with our trails here. And, oh yeah, so one thing actually before we get back to the X particles that I don't want these to appear immediately. And so one way we can adjust that is just by keyframing the size here. So if we're on frame 0, set these all to 0, and setting those to 0 will also set your fillet radius, so we have to keyframe that as well. So let's, on frame 0, let's just tick, oh, not that one, tick all of these, and then let's say frame 30, we're doing 30 frames a second, and so in 1 second we want to get to size. So let's change these all to 3.5, and I think I have the fillet at 0.5 and keyframe all of those again. So now they'll do that. Okay, now let's go back to our X particles and see what we have. I won't see anything, and then trails should shoot off and go all nutty like that. Okay, pretty cool so far. Let's put on an Octane object tag on the trail, the visible trail, and let's go in the hair tab, render as hair, tip thickness 0.001, and you're not going to see anything until I turn on the live or the viewport rendering. And let's see what we have. Just let our trails get out a bit first. Okay. I'm actually just going to put that to 1 for now. Don't mind that. Oh, and I was going to change this trail spline as well to Bezier and subdivided. I'll just smoothen those out a bit. This can maybe go down to 0.5, 0.5. Maybe 0.001. Okay. Let's turn off our viewport rendering for now. So I'll let this play out a bit, see what we have. So we're going to explode outwards. Cool, cool. Okay, now what else can we do to make this a little more interesting? We can, let's add a second emitter. I'm just going to copy this holding Control and dragging downwards. Copy our trail as well. And in this one, we want our start time to be, let's say 150. So we're gonna have, and our end to 750. And our birth rate, let's go 300. And so basically I want to make these ones kind of a glowy, kind of Yuki, seriously. Okay, sorry, my cat. And let's change this emitter color in the display. Let's change that to red-ish, and let's change it to circles filled so that we can see when they emit. Let's just turn off our cloner for now so it doesn't slow everything down. I think it was 150. They should show up. Oh, these, I didn't set this trail to XP emitter 1. Yuki, dude. Okay, so now these trails should be on the second emitter. And then once we get to 150, should get an explosion of our secondary particles. Oh, because they're in the exact same position. So you're not actually going to be able to see them, I think, is what's going on. Mission pulse. Let's do a shot instead, so we might be able to. And then we'll want the shot on. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, unfortunately with shot mode, you can't pick the start frame. I don't know why. It's kind of frustrating. Let's go back to pulse. Okay. Well, I'm going to pause and come back to this because my cat is losing her mind and really wants to go outside. So I will be back shortly. Where was I? So the second emitter here, I figured out what was going on. So I wanted to start at 150, frame 150, but it's actually starting at frame 240 because it's adding this 90 frames. So that's fine. Maybe we'll change this down to 100, so then I'll start at frame 190 instead. And so we'll just play this and you'll see that the red one should emit at frame 190. Okay, and they're still starting. Now they're starting later. Yeah, whatever. Doesn't matter. So then these trails, because I copied this emitter, they are using this same particle age question for their time. And I think that's fine. I might, well, actually, let's go into our questions and let's make a new particle age. And so this will be particle age 1, and let's have these be shorter. Let's change them to 40. And then, so we'll have to make a new action for them. Again, object actions, change trails, and then the trail we want to change is our second trail. And then same thing for those. So let's just play this through. We'll get to frame whatever, 240. I don't know why that. Anyway, so that might be a little too quick. Let's change that to 0.1. Similar naming convention. Let's do 60 frames instead. And so these trails I want to have a bit of glow on. And so let's just put this back. And I just want to see how this looks, so let's do a bit of Octane stuff. Let's make a Octane diffuse material. and set the diffuse color to black emission, black body emission, go into that, surface brightness, set it down to 10. Under texture, let's use a color. Let's do kind of an aquamarine kind of deal, and let's throw that on our XP trail 0.1. And if we go into viewport rendering, let's play this out a bit until those ones actually emit. I'm just going to pause it so it'll go a little quicker. And then once I get there, I can unpause it. And then so we'll have some glowing trails. Let's let them get out a little bit. And let's just pause it there and see what we have. It's kind of a nice look. Let's make these a little smaller. Let's do 0.1, just for a bit of a not as intense glow. And okay, cool. So just because I know in the final, I'm probably going to want to use this, let's change it to Octane settings. Let's change it to direct lighting. I usually do this for animations. You'll still get a bit of the glow effect. It just won't be as accurate, and that's fine by me. I'll get into Octane render settings once we get more into the Octane side of things, but for now, that is fine. Now the color, let's do another diffuse material, and let's make it, actually white might be fine for now, and I'm going to put that on our first trail. And I'm probably going to use the HDRI to do the coloring on it. You could use an instance color and then the display colors of the emitter to do it, but I don't think I'm going to go into that. I want to keep this one fairly simple. So I kind of like how this is going. I think there might be too many of the initial trails, so let's go into our emission of the first one. Oh, it's 1,000. I wanted that to be at 500 instead. Let's see what we have when we do that. Let's pause that for now. Just gonna zoom in and unpause. So yeah, I kind of like how we're doing here, and once we turn these back on, kind of interesting. And I'm gonna set the formula size down to 0.5, make these a little bit smaller. And it would be nice to give these some subsurface material, but that would just increase the render time. I would like to keep the render time. I usually try to keep it around 15 to 30 seconds per frame. And 1,200 frames here, it's, you know, it's going to take quite a while. So I kind of like what we've got here. I just want to play this through, let it show some of the glowing. Glow might be a little too much. Let's go into our emission tab and change the power to 5. And I kind of like where that's at. Okay. I think go more into the Octane side of things now. And okay, so to explain my Octane setup a bit, because I forgot to in my last tutorial, I will show you what I have here. So I have this HDRI, which is just a Octane Octane texture environment. Yes. And then so I have my HDRI on that texture environment. And I use HDRI link to do it, but you can just put in image texture and then add whatever HDRI you want for that. And the important part is that this first one, the lighting, is going to be set to primary environment. And then I have a second texture environment, which is just set to black or whatever color. Might change it. One thing I've been doing a lot lately is just using a gradient, just regular C4D gradient. And let's do maybe a little reddish and dark, or maybe a dark blue. Let's see what that looks like. I'm still going to put a background here, so this is maybe irrelevant, but it's just something you can do. And so the second texture environment is set to visible environment. So if I set it to primary, you can see that is the HDRI in the background. So let's just set it back to visible. Now we can play around with different HDRIs. So I'm going to click on HDRI link, and I really like to use this one. Gives a bit of kind of pastel-y, interesting colors to it. I might change this back to black. Actually, let's just go to color and darkish gray. And let's do black for now. Okay, now I want to add a sort of backplate, something I've been doing a lot lately. So that's about the size that we're going to get. So I'm just going to scroll out to the largest that the trails will be going, so it'll be about there. I'm going to skip to the end, and I'm going to keyframe. I turned off the XP system because it will attempt to fill in the gaps, and it'll just go crazy and can sometimes crash, so I just turn it off, skip to the end, and then I'm going to keyframe the camera here, jump back to the start, and you can use the squares as a bit of a baseline. I'm going to zoom camera in somewhere around there and keyframe the camera. Oh, right, I moved forward. Just gonna put a tiny cube in for reference and zoom in somewhere around there, keyframe the camera on frame 0. There. So now I'll have a very slow pullback over the length of the animation. Okay, let's see what we got here. So we'll start off on the cubes and then very slowly pull back. Okay, so now let's do our backplate. Just going to add a plane. I'm going to hold shift to do it incrementally by 10 degrees. And then let's see, turn off the system again. Let's skip to the end, see how far back. Okay, so that size of plane actually works fine. I'm gonna move back so it's not covering any of our stuff. And then, okay, so now we'll have to widen that a bit. I'm gonna set the width and height segments to 1, make it a bit smaller. Let's see if I turn our camera on. You can see that it's hitting the edges on our last frame, so that's totally fine. And perfect. So just for speediness of rendering time, I'm going to, instead of using a glossy, which I would like to do, I'm just going to use another diffuse material. Let's give this a color of, I don't know, say light, I don't know, doesn't matter. Probably change it anyway. And then in our displacement, I'm going to add displacement, level of detail, scroll wheel all the way to 8192. Because I know we're going to want it, I'm going to change the filter type to box and set it to maybe 3. Now let's add a Cinema 4D image texture. And in that image texture, I've been liking to use the French monkey. He's got a lot of packs which are great, like the Tekkit pack, the Voltaic pack, the Retina pack. They're all great, but just to keep this free, I'm going to use this amazing tool called Jace Placement. I'll leave a link in the description. And I've made a few maps with that, so let's just add one of those. Go to my displacement maps, and I've just got a bunch of Jace Placement maps that I've made ready to go. And let's try this one. And they're 8K, they're seamless, and they're just randomly generated. They're super cool. So then in the displacement, I'm gonna set it to probably around 50 for now, and put that material on our plane. Let's turn on viewport rendering again to see what we have. It's a little stretched, so let's do, no, not U, let's do V. It's just, yeah, it's kind of interesting. It'll give us a little something to show the movement of the camera, just because we'll see this getting slowly smaller. It's always nice to give a little bit of perspective, I'm finding. Okay, so let's play out a little bit. Okay, I'm actually going to switch off viewport rendering and I'm just going to dock our live viewer underneath of it, because it will show render times a little better. Let's shrink that down. And one thing I like to do with these style of animations is, so like I was saying, I switched to direct lighting just to get a lot quicker. You can see we're 0 seconds. 1920, I'm just gonna lock the ratio, or lock the resolution. And so this will give accurate render times. And so we're looking at, get to the end here, 8 seconds, great, but it's still a little grainy. So if we go into our camera imager and then denoiser and enable denoising, and then when it gets to the end here, it will denoise that and it'll look a lot better. Without reflections, it won't get too crazy, and so it actually looks pretty good. Just let that do its thing. And denoise on completion. Oh, you have to switch to D main here, and then I can switch back and forth between those two, and you can see graininess is nicely cleaned up. One important thing to know when you're doing that is go to your, when you're doing your final render, if you go to your render settings, Octane render, you have to click on use denoise beauty pass or else it won't work. So I'm just gonna dock this again, let it play, dock it there, let it play out a little bit. Until we get our glowing around 240. Yeah, let's do that there, sure. And frame forward so we get our glow. Cool. So because these are running exactly on the same path, I almost want to offset these a little bit. So what I'm going to do is go into our strange attractor. I'm going to make a copy of it. And I'm going to turn down the scale just a little bit. Let's go down to 30 instead, and we'll try that. So one thing that we have to do is, because I don't want now the first emitters to be affected by the second strange attractor. So I'm going to go into the first emitter and go into modifiers, and then exclusions. I want to exclude the second strange attractor. And in the second emitter, I want to exclude the first strange attractor. So now these ones should be slightly offset, and so they won't be running on the exact same line as our other trails. And so we'll see what happens. So now they're at least offset a little bit. I might even have to push it a little further. Let's go down to 20. So now they're not quite going out as far as these. Let's make the first trails a little bigger, give better juxtaposition. Okay, kind of cool, kind of cool. Let's undock that, close it. I'm going to switch back to viewport rendering and do a bit more lighting work. By that I mean I'm probably just going to change the HDRI. scroll through some of these. This is using the bunch of packs from Grayscale Gorilla. I think these are Grayscale Gorilla ones. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of neat. One thing I like to do to get a bit of variation throughout the animation as well is, let's get back to frame 1. I'm going to go to our HDRI, switch to rotation, or by pressing R, and I'm going to keyframe that at frame 0, and then I'm just going to rotate this by 360. 360, and then keyframe that at the last frame. And so now we'll have shifting lights throughout the course of the animation. And I'll just play it without the XP so you can, without the cloner, and so you can just see it on the backplate that the coloring will change over the course of the animation. Okay, well that was strange. I don't know why it wasn't keyframing. As soon as I turned off OBS, my recording software, now it keyframed the rotation. So anyway, moving on. That's really bizarre. Bugs. Okay, now you can see as it goes through that the color changes. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much it. Turn these back on. Just watch through the animation that we have. Now, of course, you could go through different camera angles and everything. I just like these long, slow zooms, kind of these reveal things. I found in a lot of the work that I really like, the more cinematic ones just have these long, slow pans or slow zoom outs, and yeah, it's really cool. I like it. So, could add more things. We could render these particles or these particles, just for some extra stuff. But just for simplicity's sake, I might keep it like this. So. Let's just pause that, let it render out a bit how it is. And these cubes are kind of boring. Maybe we'll do a bit of reflections on them. I'll do a glossy, let's make them reddish pink. Cube. Just a bit of variety. A little more interesting. Change that to 1, yeah. Now, yeah, I would encourage you to play around with strange attractors and other modifiers as well, especially these questions. There's so many things that you can do with the questions. You can, if I had another question, there's just so many things you can do. You can have it, even at age, you could say, don't want to change trails action, you want to turn on a modifier, like turn on network or turn on gravity, so that when they reach 90 frames, they fall. Like I did this one on my Instagram with these bananas all flying out of this dude's hand, and when they got to a certain frame, they fell to the ground. And yeah, no, it's just interesting looks you can get. So yeah, I guess just when you're doing your outputs, make sure you go to all frames, and yeah, in your rendering, if you're going to have motion blur, turn on camera motion blur, and then if you're denoising, use denoise beauty pass. And I always click on use all GPUs as well. So yeah, that was about it. Yeah, play around with strange attractors. They're super cool. And again, if you make something cool, make something with this tutorial, tag me, send me a message. I'd love to see it. Okay, thanks. Bye.